Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here once again. Welcome, welcome. Today is July 3rd, and you're welcome to another episode of MyTake Chat Show. I'm so excited to be here. Every time we get to have another interesting conversation is always a great time. My name is Adenyke. I'm the host of today's show, and I'm always glad to have with me my girlfriends who are also part of the show. I'd let them introduce themselves, starting with Tutu.
Hi everyone, I'm Tutu and it's great to be here.
Excellent. Dami.
Hi, I'm Dami. It's great to be here and to see you all again.
Fantastic.
Hello, I'm Jumi. It's been a minute since I've been here, but I'm glad to be here again. I've missed you guys.
Indeed, so glad to have Jumi on board today. Always an exciting time when the ladies gather together. It's holiday weekend, so we know that folks are doing all sorts of things, but glad to have our ladies in the house. Well, for those who might be new to MyTake is a forum where we ladies hang out, unwind, chat about the happenings around us while lending our voices to some of the social issues in the world today. So we talk about things that's going on around us or just basic topics that, as women, as guys, we think also are pertinent to building successful relationships. Our goal is to promote a culture of love and compassion when it comes to relationship, but also to tell the truth and to be very, very candid as well. On today's episode, we're asking a question. Should we outlaw the in-laws? I got quite a bit of funny feedback from quite a lot of people when they saw that. So this should be an interesting one. And I'm actually quite excited to have with us two marriage counselors who are quite seasoned, who have been, who I expect would give us a very, very interesting take on some of the issues and the scenarios we'll be talking about. Let me first of all start off with Jacqueline, who's going to just introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she does. I'm so glad to have you here, Jacqueline. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Adenyke, for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jacqueline Oludemu, like Adenyke already said. I am tagged the marriage evangelist, and I have a calling upon my life to see that we have more marriages that are on purpose, marriages that are fulfilling God's purpose and not just existing because everyone gets married. There are purposes of marriage, and people need to begin to come to the light of that so that they can fulfill destiny. That's who I am in a bit. Thank you.
Love that. Love that. Excellent. So glad to have you here today. And our other guest is, we call him fondly Pastor Tunde, but he's also another very interesting guest that we have who's also had quite a few years in this space talking to couples. Let me let him introduce himself a bit more and tell us a bit more about himself.
Good day, everyone. So great to be on the MyTake platform for the very first time. So a little bit of myself. I'm Tunde. I'm married to Buki. I've been married for over 20 years. We have two lovely children. And I've also been involved in local ministry in the Washington, D.C. area called Jesus South D.C. As a minister there. So I just love serving God. And I'm also involved in business. So glad to be here with the ladies and here to learn and share. Thank you.
Excellent. Fantastic. Good to have you here. Thank you. So, over the years, we've come across different real life scenarios. Almost everyone here literally is involved in either counseling or marriage mentoring in one form or the other. And that's why I love the experience and the reality that we'll bring in. On MyTake show, we try and keep it real. So we're going to be having real conversations and talking about, the challenges we've heard of, maybe even experienced personally when it comes to managing relationships with in-laws. And when we talk about in-laws, we're not just talking about parents-in-laws. We have siblings-in-laws as well. We call them in-laws, but we know that sometimes the love can be a little bit strained. So how do we manage this? Especially now that we see and we keep hearing from some people this line of thought. Some people believe that when you marry a person, you're marrying that person. While others believe that when you marry a person, you are marrying their extended family. Is this true? both from a biblical perspective? Is that the expectation? I would like to initially just even hear your thoughts about this whole concept of, I only married you, I didn't marry your sister, I didn't marry your brother, or you marry the whole family, they come in a package. I mean, Jumoke, it's been a while. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What perspective should people be taking to this, in your opinion?
Okay, so yes, I've heard both angles before, but whether we like it or not, you're married to the family. That's the way I see it. You're married to your spouse. Yes, we know that because only two people took those vows. You know, it's you and your spouse. But really, nobody is isolated. Nobody can live in isolation. Nobody is doing this marriage thing in the bubble. So yeah, you're gonna have to learn how to, I don't know what word to use, but involve the family to an extent. Now, what do you consider the family? Okay, so that's another way to look at it. Is it the parents of your spouse, the siblings, the uncles, the aunties? You know, coming from our background, we know what family means, right? So it's up to the couple to now decide who has some sort of influence in this marriage thing, and you have to come to an agreement. So I found out that a few, I will only talk about women, young ladies, I would say, or women in general, that know the kind of families their significant other comes from, right? So in the process of dating, they already know, and then you have an idea whether you're going to be marrying your spouse or the family. So if you already know this and you make the decision to go into marriage knowing that you are going to be married to the family, by all means, you just have to do what you got to do. That's it. Because you cannot do anything about it. It's up to your spouse to now do something about it. Because the way we're phrasing this now, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, is that the woman knows that she's married into the husband's family, and the husband looks at this family, the wife's family, or the wife to be, and says, I'm okay doing this. So this is a decision you've made going into the marriage itself.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so I get what you're saying. Yes, you at some point a decision has been made, which whether you speak about it or not means you are accepting where this other person is coming from. That's an interesting way to definitely approach it and to think about it. Dami, do you concur?
Absolutely. I think I totally echo everything Jimmy's just said. Yes, when you do marry, you marry each other. Absolutely. You marry, for love. You see each other, you fall in love, and you get married. Hopefully, somewhere along that journey, you would have met a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister, and nothing gets sprung on you out of the blue. They just, they don't turn up with like 50 sisters and and 20 brothers. But I think absolutely, definitely, you should know what you're getting into, and just in terms of what the dynamics look like. How you shape that relationship and how you interact with them is now up to you and your spouse, you and your partner to set some parameters and some boundaries around that relationship. If you're lucky enough to have in-laws who absolutely love one another and you love them, they love you, they love your family, that's just a marriage made in heaven. If not, it's about how do we make it work. So yeah, so I totally echo Jimmy.
Okay. Thank you very much for that intro. I would love to hear what the counselors think, but I think they'll filter it in as we go along in the discussion. So I like what you've both said. We're hoping that we're matured people. Most people think when they get married, I like my in-laws, they're lovely, they've welcomed me into the family. That's how it normally starts out, right? Okay, until certain life events happen. So for today's show, we've thought about it, the team thought about it and said, look, what are the realities that we find? So I'm going to kick off with the first scenario, which we've classified as marrying into a family where you end up finding out, because you may not know initially, that you have demanding in-laws. So who are demanding in-laws? I refer to them as in-laws who expect have expectations of your marriage shortly after you enter into it. It could even come as in a simple way, I an expectation to come live with you when you start having children, an expectation to support you. It could be that your in-laws expect that, you spend time with them. I know a particular scenario where it was quote unquote an unspoken thing. She didn't think it was a big deal, but every Christmas holiday had to be at her husband's family's house. And the first year they actually thought about going away on holiday, it was a big deal, because there was this quiet expectation that all the children, it is the tradition, everybody comes to the house for Christmas holiday. What do you mean you're going abroad for the holiday? That can't happen. So when you have demanding in-laws, that was not always obvious. How do you start to manage that relationship when they have expectations on your time, on how you spend holiday visits? From our culture, there are some families that once there's a party, they expect the wife to move over there 2 days before. She's helping cook, serve, or there's a family marriage, you become the one going around kneeling down to the younger ones, auntie, uncle. They demand all these things from you. Jacqueline, how do you manage such a scenario if you find yourself in a demanding with demanding in-laws?
Thank you, Adenyke. Demanding in-laws, I think they're demanding because you haven't set the expectations. You have not declared the expectations. You have left them with unrealistic expectations. And that's why the work I do with pre-married couples is very big for me. What should a couple do if they find themselves in such a situation? You should do what you should have done before you got married, which is start communicating, start talking, start being clear on where you stand as a family. What is more important to you as a family? I mean, I have a typical example, a family, a man with about 3 daughters. He was, the third daughter came to him about a few months before she got married. And she said, Dad, just to let you know, I know we always have, traditionally Christmas at your house, and even my other sisters will come with their family. But I just want to let you know ahead, that I and Tony will not be coming for Christmas here, every year. And we just want you to know. And she said, we're also not going to be going to Tony's family. We want to have Christmas to remember every year, and most likely we'll be traveling as family. And even if we're not traveling, we want to have an intimate Christmas as a nuclear family. Simple. The father was pained because, of course, that's tradition, so that we understand that it wasn't easy. I mean, it's something they've been doing for a long time, but she had to be clear. I think, Adenyke, that where, the problem is when we get married and we don't do what God has asked us to do from the very beginning, which is leaving and cleaving. We think of that leaving and cleaving as a process of just moving our things and being far away. So I used to live in Washington. So now we've moved to maybe South Carolina or wherever, or UK, and you think that's all there is to it. That's not all there is to it. There's some psychological detachments that we need to do, So if you haven't done it and you're married and you're already facing these demanding in-laws, it's just time to sit and talk. But before you talk, make sure that you and your husband are on the same page, or you and your wife are on the same page. Agree on what we're saying and what we're going to put forward nicely in advance. Go and prepare the minds of your parents, in-laws, about whether you're going to do this or not do this. I remember I had a scenario of a couple, the lady said she had to always attend, like you said, 2 days ahead or 1 day ahead to a family's event and be there. We had children all over the grandma's house and everything, and they had to cook. And I said, what are the other ways you could do this? What do they need from you? They need you to tidy up or wash plates or whatever. Can you get someone else to do it for you? So she sends in a help, to go and represent her, go and wash all the dishes and, do everything that they need me to do. And she just comes early in that day and she crosses her legs and she has a great time with her in-laws, rather than be sweaty all over. Sincerely speaking, if we can just think about the better way to do these things without hurting, without having the mindset that, they're against me, they don't want me to have my own family, we would have resolution. I hope that what I've shared, would help someone there. Go in advance. Don't wait until 25th to say we're not coming. That's terrible. So go 6 months ahead, 3 months ahead, and say, Daddy, we're not coming. And let the child say to their parent, not you. I think that happens. And I think that would be my counsel.
I was literally going to thank you so much. That is fantastic. I was literally going to ask you about that. Who should do the communication with the parent? And I'm happy for anybody to jump in. But there was something you said. What about the scenario where, how do you handle when you say, what do they need me to do? This is what we need you to do. And then you tell your mother-in-law that I will send my house help to go and do this. And she's like, Jimmy's wife that came, are you better than her? That you're sending house help? I come and do the thing. What if it's that kind of family that they feel, yeah, you can send somebody, but we want to know you are still serving in your husband's house. If you then get that kind of pushback, I don't know what the other ladies think, but how do you think that should be managed as well?
So I agree with what Jacqueline said about having the spouse communicate to their family. So in that kind of scenario, ahead of time, the husband should have called his mom or his sisters or whoever is going to be in charge that, look, on that day, there are things that I want my wife to do, but she's going to send so and so person. Don't be offended. But she's going to come, and then the wife on her own part should also communicate that, oh, I'm going to do my best to be there at so and so time. She's not going to say, I'm going to send someone, and then leave it to the in-laws to say, oh, your husband already called and said he's sending someone, and then you can still do what Yoruba people call karamasi, like, oh, really, I still plan to be there, I'm still going to come and do my best, so they know that you are the one. So if there's any negative feelings coming out, it should be directed at their son. So when they think about you, they'll be like, but she didn't even mind. She was still offering to do XYZ, not knowing that, you and your husband already had that conversation. So wisdom is really needed in these things. And then when you go there, and of course, when you show up, don't just cross. Do you understand? Still, at least show some, at least maybe to your mother-in-law or your older sisters-in-law, still try and do stuff for them. Don't tell the house help, so go and give them food. No, you get up and go and do that. So they actually see that you are making an effort.
Thank you.
I just want to add that people should. Oh, okay, sorry. I just want to add that people should study the culture of the families they're getting into, right? Like, if you're already in this day and age where some people, I feel, rush into this marriage thing without really thinking some things through. And some people usually think this is like my husband and I, whatever. It's not, because if it truly was, we wouldn't be having this point. So I say that because each family has a different culture. So what Tutu said, I 100% agree with it. But there's some families that's not even, they're like, what? Who? Even the mother-in-law self is not trying to cook in her own house. So you have to study the culture, what is of value to them, okay? And compromise. I guess that's what you ladies were talking about anyway, and compromise depending on the situation going on in that family, and I think also communication and the dynamics are different. So I will use myself as an example. My father-in-law, rest his soul, if I really needed anything, my husband is probably not going to talk to him. I will talk to him because I have that relationship with him, right? Because I want something done, it's going to grant my request, And then my mother-in-law, I know how to approach her in terms of getting my desirable outcome, right? It's in how you do it. And, like Jacqueline said, don't call 2 days or the day off and say, we're not doing that. That's not nice, whether it's a coworker or friend, you don't do that to anyone, right? So you don't want to do that to your in-laws. So I say culture is key. The spouse also should be protective of the spouse coming into the family, right? Because it works both ways. I'm protective of my husband when it comes to my family. He's protective of me when it comes to his family. But that does not mean we don't have moving parts. Okay, I've rambled enough, so I'll let somebody else go.
Well, why don't you take us through the next scenario, Jumoke? That's a good one because I think we can move. There's a couple of things we can add to it at that point.
Go ahead and tell me the next scenario, Nike.
But you were speaking about.
When we're talking about controlling in-laws, for example, and I think that is one area that I mean, you've touched on it a little bit. So I guess when you feel as if your mother-in-law, your father-in-law is in charge of your marriage, right?
I think,
yes.
Jackie wanted to say something, and I think Dami wanted to say something too.
Yeah. Go on, Dam.
I think you're a bit dummy, because I just wanted to say that, when they push back even on that offer, you want to communicate. And I think it's also important to state here, Adenyke and everyone else, that please, when we're getting married, we actually pull out to come and build our own government, nation as a family, our own culture. Do you see? It's very important that we take that on. And that's why you see that what they were doing in my family before I got married, I'm probably not doing most of it anymore, because I'm now in my own family, and we have to be forward looking more than backward looking, even in building our home. I just wanted to put that out there, because if we keep looking at the context and the box of culture, if you see what I mean, even in the days we live in, you would see that we may tend to keep having that, friction back and forth until a man and woman comes together to say, this is what our own constitution will be in this home. They agree and run and raise the kids in line with that. I just wanted to just say that.
Okay. Why don't I take this next scenario, and then I'll let Dami also chip in when we talk through it, because like Jumoke was saying the other time about the controlling in-law, we have scenarios, and this is so helpful because different people have different realities, and we know that underlining this is how the couple manage it. But I have counseled quite a few couples where you can tell that, and I really need to bring it home to this couple right now. I know we've said what's ideal, but in today's world, we find a situation where the voice of mom or the voice of dad on either side, or the voice of big brother or the voice of big sister, you can hear it in your spouse's voice, right? So sometimes you feel you want to push back, but you feel your in-laws are sort of controlling your spouse. Their opinion carries so much weight. Yes, you're trying to build your own constitution, but sometimes what if your spouse doesn't see what the big deal is? So you feel that your parents' in-laws are still controlling your spouse. Now, this now becomes sensitive. The first one could be, okay, both of you are on the same page, like Tutu said, this is what we're going to tell them. What do you do when you feel that your husband or your wife is very influenced by her family, and you see it when it comes to your lifestyle decisions? Pastor Tunde, I don't know what you think about, that scenario, if you're familiar, how to deal with those sort of issues, because now it's coming into your home.
Thank you. You can just call me Tunde to keep it simple. But very good points have been made so far. And I think demanding, and when you look at demanding and controlling, it's just a step further down that line towards what to be ultimate destruction for a home or marriage. Demanding is really requiring more time, more attention, more effort from whether the husband or the wife. But controlling is really trying to really influence your behavior. And when it starts getting to influencing your behavior, whether it's from siblings, you have to therefore ask yourself, this living and cleaving, what is it about? You mentioned a scenario where the more, let's even look at it from a feminine perspective. I'm speaking as a man now, where you're married to a wife and everything she wants to do in terms of children or choices is really my mom is my best friend. I need to get her opinion. I mean, that happens to men as well, and men complain about that. Why is it that everything we have to do, you have to ask your mom for what she thinks, or your mom's decision weighs so much on it, and it feels like a weight to the guy or the man's heart. I think what's important here is boundaries for us, as you said. I mean, a lot has been said about that, boundaries, walking through that. But then when you're already in the game and it's halftime, what do? I think one of the best ways to start this is having objective conversations. It's not always easy. Remember that the spouse has been living this influence lifestyle all their life before you came into the marriage, and trying to just change that behavior won't be an overnight thing. But if you have this kind of peer accountability dialogues that, really what I call candid conversations and say, look, this is what's happening to you. Certainly, if this was your girlfriend, this is how you would agree that they're influencing your behavior. Why should your mom be deciding my children's school? Or the names that I call my children. And that's happened. I have friends where the mom wants the husband to address the child by the name she gave. And the husband said, "This is my child." I mean, that is really controlling. And I think having that kind of dialogue with the spouse, because if the spouse doesn't see it, it's difficult. And I think one thing that we often do is we try to take it out on the in-laws. It's not always their fault. Remember, they're just trying to have their way, live their dreams. We are the ones that should be living and cleaving and trying to really live our own dreams and build a culture and future for ourselves. I think the difficult place to start from is that dialogue with your spouse and saying, this is what it's doing to me. No one can take that away. What you are allowing to happen is doing this to me. Is this what you want from me? Oftentimes, that's a voice of reason, because then someone can start thinking that, wait a minute, it's not about you attacking my in-law or trying to create a space between me and my sibling. It's about you trying to, you want the best for the marriage and the best for yourself and for us. And it's easier to then say, because of this action, I feel this way, and I think you can help me. That dialogue engenders a level playing field. And as a guy, it doesn't feel like you're being authoritative. You call my child this name, or else, it doesn't go from that perspective. The other thing I would say is, you need to be in tune with your wife, because most things you see as controlling, they're not. I mean, or your spouse. I mean, if you're the wife as well, you may think that the brother that's saying, "Oh, this is what you should do," or "This is how your wife should do this," or "This way your wife." They don't see that way. I don't see my brother's conversation about my family as controlling, but my wife can, and you cannot deny that feeling. And do something about the feeling. I'll just leave it at that. Have that candid conversation, do something about that feeling, and address it from how that person feels. I feel this way, and no one's going to attack me that way. And if you start from that with prayers, I believe there can be. But remember, the way you know there's change is when you start making decisions that are not based on outcomes, and behaviors are not based on people's people's inclinations and people's control. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank
Wow.
you, Tunde. Thank you. You really went in depth on that. And this brings us to the next scenario of the meddling in-laws. They mean well. They offer unsolicited advice to, for example, how you spend your money, what you should invest in, how you parent, your children. And they're not doing it out of malice. They're just doing it out of love, but they don't know when they cross the line. So what do you do in such scenarios? And, for me personally, like I said earlier, a lot of wisdom is needed when you're dealing with your in-laws. This is what has worked for me. This is what I advise women when I talk to women, or when I talk to couples, to husbands as well. You don't want to come out as that spouse that is rude to the in-laws, because the truth is, they will not forget, or they may not, let me not say will, they may not forget, and they will always forgive their own. No matter what I do to my parents, eventually, my parents love me, and, they'll come around. But it will sound different when it's coming from my husband. So again, I just feel that, wisdom is really, really profitable to direct. So for example, if your in-laws say to you, your son, how come he's 15 and he can't even wash his plates? How come he doesn't do this? When my child, or when, your husband's brother's son was 10, he was already driving, he was already doing X, what do you do in that situation? My recommendation is, thank them. Don't get all defensive. Thank them that, really? Okay, I'll see what I can do about it, or whatever. And of course, when you're with your husband, you can talk to your husband, and, have your husband, look, you better go and set your mom or your sister or your brother, you better go and set them straight, blah, blah, blah. So by the time your husband is talking to his family, or your wife is talking to her family, they are going to be looking at him surprised, like, what do you mean by that? Your wife didn't have a problem with it. And then he can say, well, I have a problem with it. I don't want you, this is how I want to train my child. See, even though if your husband says that to his family, they may get upset, everybody fights, but they will come around. But if it comes out of your own mouth, so again, my recommendation always is, use wisdom. Just use wisdom, and it doesn't mean you're a fool. It doesn't mean you don't know your rights, you don't know your place. But honestly, a lot of problems can be avoided if we only use wisdom. I mean, that's my take on this. And I'd like to also give an example with my own marriage. For example, my parents, my mom is very involved in terms of, calling or what's going on, blah, blah, blah. My husband, on the other hand, does not have time to call anybody. So when we first got married, my mom used to, have all this attitude like, your husband doesn't call, your husband doesn't do this. And I told her straight up, I said, Mommy, my husband does not even call his own mother. If it's time for him to talk to his mom, I call his mom and I give him the phone to talk to his mom. I said, so you just, and since then, in fact, if my mom makes some excuses for my husband, I'm always looking at her like, wow, who is he? Do you understand? Like, where do you know this man from that you're making all these excuses? My own mother tells me, Tutu, you don't understand Muyiwa. The way Muyiwa is, if only you can be patient to study him. This is now my own mom telling me this now. And, if she needs to talk to him, if she hasn't heard from him in a while, she calls him. She gets my dad to call him. The only time Muyiwa calls them, maybe on their birthdays or on Christmas Day, when I call and he's around, he'll just be like, oh, Jackie, Kinya or Mommy, let me say hello to your parents or whatever. But it's no longer an issue. But when we first got married, my mom used to get all worked up about this. But I set her straight and she no longer feels that way.
I think you raised some very, very good points, on really how to manage meddling in-laws. I'm so curious also to hear some of Jackie's experience, because you've really nailed it on the head in that approach. And Jacqueline, I'd like you to also take the approach. I think for me, if you can please help guide us, what happens? These things make sense when you say, let your husband know and he lets them know. Let your wife know, she lets them know. What if they don't see it? What if what you are calling meddling, the spouse cannot say, Pastor Tunde is agreeing. So I'm going to let Jacqueline say something and let Pastor Tunde to speak immediately after. A lot of what we're seeing in marriages is when couples are not on the same page. That what you think is meddling, they're like, my sister was only trying to be nice, you to calm down. And then that irritates you. Don't tell me to calm down. So what do you do when it begins to snowball like that? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I wanted Pastor Tunde to go on because it seemed like he had that right in his mouth already.
Yes.
But I wanted to speak more to boundaries. But if he goes on, because I really wanted to help a lot of us with what boundary really means. I think a lot of people don't understand what boundaries really mean and how to set them. And so that's where the problem is, from the very beginning. But I want Pastor Tunde he had that right in his mouth.
Yes, that's a good point. Yes.
Thank you very much. I know it's just interesting when you think about meddling. It's really when you're trying to meddling is trying to interest yourself in what is not your concern. That's really what it is. And I think there's someone in scripture that talks about don't be a busybody in other people's matters. So you have to remember that it comes from a need, a human need. People feel lonely. The spouse may have siblings or may have a widowed parent. So there is a gap somewhere that is there's an attempt, at least, human attempt to fill it. So I think what you can't forget is there must be empathy in how you approach it, because if you don't bring that to the table, things can go sour very quickly. And oftentimes a spouse that is being meddled with may have that in the back of their mind. So it's always good to always ask for clarity. I mean, this appears on this, or sometimes they don't even know, they're just ignorantly following along. But there is a void. So keep that in mind, because that gives you the grace to then, as you, and I know Jacqueline will go into boundaries, approach that boundary. You will also approach from a position of love and grace. But people who are busybodies are that way because they have a gap. So you have to really, really talk to your spouse and say, look, how can we help here? If it's a mother-in-law, is it because there's something that needs to, I mean, they're retired, is there a way to keep them occupied? I mean, meddling is when they call and say, "Oh, so what do you cook? What do you cook for your husband this week? Or when are you having the next child?" There are different things like that. We haven't really had that. Your friend bought a house, or when are you buying now? It's just getting into things that are just off color, not necessary. So you're having that conversation, and those things come up, and you just know this is meddling. I think the first conversation don't let it go on. Quickly have a conversation. When you get home, bring it up in a jovial, kind of like comedial way. Like, what was that about? And I think if you do that, first it diffuses the tension of why didn't you speak? What was that about? Is there something that could be done there? Should we really be praying for that person or find a way to assist? It then takes the attention off you, because you've then focused on your boundary and then try to say this person's an outsider, maybe they need help. But it does happen, and most times meddling is really the easiest thing to deal with if the two are one. If the two people see the same thing, you just recognize that this is some person, but that is maybe in need, or maybe just trying to offer an opinion or interest themselves in what's going on. Sometimes it's just to find out information, and if the two are one, it's easier to deal with. Now, when it is not that way, when someone accepts our opinion, I think it's more leaning towards controlling at that point in time, because your meddling is different from controlling, and we talked about demanding, which is different from controlling and meddling. So I think discerning which one it is important, and addressing it from that position of, is this a gap? Is this a mother-in-law that is lonely, that we now need to maybe invest more time in, and maybe get our siblings to maybe rally around? I think you can turn that into a ministry, and it's probably easier to do it that way. Thank you.
I love that. I love how you identified each of the scenarios and what the differences between, and the complexity of each one as well, and the resolution. I think what Jacqueline is going to bring, I really sense that it's going to be very, very important for this conversation. So Jacqueline, if it's okay, let me move on. I wanted Dami to make some comments, and I'll also open up to Jumoke, especially for us to really bring in the toxic one, because I sense that there will be a common thread across all of them that I'd really like Jacqueline to speak to. So, Dami, if you can, share some of your thoughts as well, and that'll be great.
Brilliant. Should I move into toxic? Like, should we talk about the toxic in-laws?
Yes.
Or okay, we should. And this is my thing, the toxic in-laws. So, so when we talk about toxic in-laws, we're talking about the family members who judge, who are critical of everything that you do when you're home, who have opinions, who have, there's a better way in which you can do this. There's a look, like in my case, why don't you put that painting? It sounds very minor, but you don't come into my house and tell me where to put a painting, or where to put the flowers. It sounds very minor, but it's those kind of little things that when they come into the house, or where they try to make you feel like you don't measure up, that your standards are really no standards at all. And it's about, how do we deal with that? How do we navigate that? And I think in my experience, and I'll be really quick, because I also want to ask our counselors on the call also their opinions. But in my case, it was flipped the other way around. So I've always prayed, like I think I was sharing with the ladies earlier. I'd always pray that when it's time for me to get married, I need to get married to somebody who doesn't have a mum. And that was my only prayer. I never prayed about rich, tall, dark, handsome. Nope, British, American, Chinese. Didn't pray for none of that. I just said, Father Lord, the only thing I ask this one thing I ask of you is that let his mom be dead. It sounds really harsh. And it was funny because then when I then met my husband and I asked him, so do you have a mom? This was literally the first date. He said, oh no, unfortunately she passed away 10 years ago. I was like, get in, and I was like, yeah, so you're the one I'm going to marry. Anyway, so we're married and amazing, he had a stepmom, he's one of 8 lovely siblings. And the toxic family turned out to be my family. The family, and it was a flip for me, like an absolute flip. My mom was that mother-in-law. My siblings were those, siblings. And my husband's very quiet. He's very quiet. He's very, he's there, but, his presence is there, but he doesn't talk. He doesn't really voice. He doesn't. And he just sits, because if you're around my family will take over everything. So you can't get a word in. And I quickly realized that, okay, so God, what I prayed for, you've kind of allowed me to see it in my own family. It's in my mom, it's in my siblings, it's and it was about how did, and it was about navigating that and being the one who stood up as a defender for my husband. I had to be his voice. I had to be the one to call things out, because I knew he wasn't going to do it, but I knew it was a huge, we were constantly battling heads. He wasn't getting on with my mom, wasn't getting on with my siblings. We would have family events and it was tense. And my mom was very, would very, very, share her thoughts. She didn't feel like she could hold back. She would be very vocal and let us know. And she would let me know on occasions that, if you had married, a certain class, a family from a certain standing or a certain, we wouldn't be having this situation or this. And I needed a lot of wisdom. I needed prayers, and I was constantly finding myself going back to my husband. I'm so sorry, babe. I'm so sorry. She didn't mean it. She's like, no, she did. She did. Don't tell me she didn't mean it. And we were constantly having to go around and around that. And we're talking, about 15 years later now. We're in a place where we all understood each other. But what do you do when the family members are your family members, and it's just almost impossible for you to get it through to them that you don't do this, or this is not acceptable? Because at the end of the day, my mom will say to me, well, I did this and it was fine. We did this with the 4 of you and it was absolutely fine. So why can't you do this? Or why can't your husband see it this way? And it's those kind of little jabs and digs that build over time to some kind of toxic relationship that then you have to really, really say, okay, you know what, mom, if you're going to do this, or brother, if you're going to be this way, then I'm afraid we probably aren't going to. And I had to do that. And my mom stayed with me. My mom chose not to speak to me for a year because of that.
Wow.
I had to say, if you're going to choose to disrespect my husband, I said, Mom, I love you. I love you with everything that I have. But I also love him. And I love my family. And I love my children. But if you're not going to respect him for who he is, for the job that he has, for the way that he speaks, for the education, whatever it is, then I'm going to, I'm not picking, but I have to put my foot down on this. And for a year, a solid year, 365 days, we didn't speak, she didn't call. We would call, she wouldn't pick up, it was very clear. And I think sometimes you just have to do the hard thing. The hard thing has to be done. And I don't know whether the council, Jacqueline, if what you would say to that kind of environment, what do you do? What do you make the hard decision like I had to make and say, okay, well, so be it. If you choose not to, then fine. Or do you still try to do the Jesus thing and I was praying. I prayed the whole year. I never stopped. I did not cease in prayer. But what do you do?
Dami, thank you. And that was so practical. I love it so much. What will I do? I think you answered already. The Jesus thing. I think if we look at Jesus as well, Jesus told his disciples, if you go into a place and they don't welcome you, what should you do? Dust off your shoes and go. It's not because I don't love them, not because I don't want them to hear the sermon, but because you can't force yourself or people on, people can't force themselves. So there's got to always be boundary lines. There's got to always be respect, And I wanted to just share quickly about boundaries, to say that boundaries just means being able to say no and being able to receive a no when it comes to you as well. That's what boundaries means. I want us to have a picture in our mind as we listen to me of a house. A lot of us live abroad. I live in the UK, and I know a lot of you live in the US as well. Unlike Nigeria, where most of our houses already have like tall fences. In the UK and the US, most houses don't have tall fences. But trust me, you and I know where your house ends and begins. Yes or no? You dare not take your picnic into or your party into the next compound. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether there is a fence or not, a boundary line has been established even in your psychological mind that, oh no, that is John and Stevens or whatever's compound. We can't have our stuff there. Do you see? And so it means that this has been established. So we need to build a habit of establishing boundaries, of being able to say no. See, I want to share something, and it's in line with what you said, Dami, about the toxic family even being from your side. I know a story currently happening of a mother who came from Nigeria to stay with her daughter in the UK here. They have fought like 3 times. She's not happy right now because she feels like her children are witnessing, this toxic environment where the mother is always backlashing her. The other time she said the mom was saying, oh, you don't serve your husband like that. Why do you do that? You should do this. And she's like, Mom, you're gonna leave in a few weeks or months. You're gonna try and set up a new rule for me in my home that you won't, you're not gonna sustain for me. Do you know how we've been doing it all these years? So the truth of the matter is, if you don't spell it out from the beginning, if you don't stick by it, you want to begin to ask yourself, are we going to live in this house based on the expectations or our own expectations, based on what works for us or based on what works for them? Because if it's what works for them, then they should be the one married in this home, not you and I. If you see what I mean. And so if we know that we want to guard our peace, we want to guard our unity, our oneness, you see, our oneness is strengthened in how we are able to build boundaries, how we are able to make people stay where they are meant to go. You know what it means to leave? It means to go away from something. And what it means to cleave is to stick closely. Dami, what you did was you stuck closely to your husband. That's what the Bible expects of us. God is actually not interested in divorce. So if anything is he says, if this is gonna pluck your eye, you're gonna try your best, yes, with love, but you have to guard your home. You have to guard your marriage and your children. Be ready to speak up. So I wanted to just share that because I feel like we're not prioritizing what's important. When we live and cleave, there is a level of priority that happens. There's an arrangement that happens. So at that time, what happens is you establish a new authority for yourself, which is both of us. Not mommy and daddy or auntie and uncle. You also cut off ties of dependency and allegiance. Your allegiance changes. It is to my wife or to my husband. I don't know if we totally hear what I'm saying. And so that helps. That this Jesus Bible thing we're talking about, Saul was a father-in-law to David. And even though Saul tried to kill David, which is like the highest level of whatever an in-law would want to try and do to you, isn't it? You would see that David was still honorable, but even more importantly is the fact that his wife, Michal, was very much in with her husband. She stuck to her husband. I hope we know that. She stuck to him and she ensured that she supported him and even saved David's life. That's a typical example for us. I always talk about the relationship between Moses and his father-in-law as well. That's another example. The relationship between Ruth and and Naomi. We have examples in the Bible that we can pick from because you must protect your joy. You must protect your unity and your oneness in that home. And your children must thrive. They must have a great picture, of a good marriage to look out, not like mother and mother fighting the house or mother-in-law. No, you have to be careful. If it means mom is not coming for holidays in London for the next 2 years, oh, I'm sorry, mom. Until we get it right, that when you come, you're not going to tell off my husband in front of me or in front of the kids. You're not going to come. And I hope that we get it. And it's with love. Pastor Tunde is with love, because I know empathy was big. It was big for you. But yes, we just have to protect what matters most. And the priority has changed. My family first. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. And honestly, Dami, thank you for giving us that real scenario. When we started off and you talked about, praying that, I don't want to marry somebody that has a mom. That was so funny. But God had to tweak it around because that's how life is. we keep thinking of what we want to work for us until we realize that in your situation, it became flipped, right? And I think Jacqueline, beautifully laid out, what we believe about boundaries. There was a specific question to Tunde, and I want him to take that. And then I'm going to put Jumoke on the spot a bit, because I think, there's a reality that, she has that, maybe we'll use that to round up. But I'll let Tunde take the question. I think it's pretty clear because I saw you nodding when you looked at it.
Yeah, so someone, thank you, Kenny, for being bold to ask that question. I gave you a woman's perspective, and you're asking what would be the scenario for the benefits of those who may be listening to this, who when his husband is the one that's always going to the mom for approval. And Jacqueline, thanks so much for touching on boundaries. I also want to take that thought on boundaries to another. You see, is the husband physically there's a physical boundary between the husband and the family? Yes, there is, because the mother-in-law is not in the bed with the wife, with the husband. It's the wife. Is there an emotional boundary? Perhaps not, and that's where most of these things are emotional boundaries. When it says live and cleave, we may live physically, or we may not live emotionally. So that husband has had this mom being his superhero all the days, telling him that he's a winner, he's the best thing. And that's where he gets his affirmation from. And when he goes to the mom and listens to that counsel, perhaps what it is that the wife should do two things. One, try and have a dialogue about it, but two, ask, are you affirming the husband enough? Are you being that cheerleader? Because it may be that the reason why he still wants to continue to go to the wife and to the mom and get that counsel is because he needs that sense of affirmation. He needs that sense that the way I know I'm successful is not when I come back home, it's when my mom takes me. So he hasn't matured emotionally, even though he has left and physically cleaved to his wife. So a dialogue about that is important. Too, if you sense some pushback, and start being that cheerleader, start affirming, look at what gap the mother is feeling for emotionally, and find a place for yourself in that gap. Because if you don't, you continue to let that emotional and soul tie continue. And don't forget that mother umbilical cord. I mean, women describe that as so tight and bonding, and I guess there are 5 people that can speak better about that than I can on this call. So it's not going to be easily broken, especially when the child is not man enough. And don't say that he's not man enough to break it. And it's an emotional thing. So what you need to do is pray about it, certainly have a conversation about it, and look at the areas where the influence is. Is it about choices for career? It's about financial choices, about decisions, major decisions in life. The mother has to approve of the house before it gets purchased, etc., etc. And you try to talk to your husband. I want to be the one feeling that emotional void, and I want you to define an emotional boundary. It's not always easy, but one way is limit the conversation that you have with your mom. I want you to spend that time with me. I want you to feel that, and women know how to do that. So ask for that. Second is if you have to talk to your mom, can we have that conversation? Can I be included in that dialogue? Because all of a sudden, being included means you're part of the conversation, and then maybe it's not as emotionally engaging as it would be. And there are different other matters that approaches you can take. But when it comes to that, I think what it is an emotional boundary that you need to establish. And if your guy can't do it, help him do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I know that because we don't have enough time, I get it. But honestly, that is a big problem, for me. And I'm going to speak because I just feel that, and what you've said is, I get what you're saying, that if the person is already in that situation. And I think this is a very good point to really talk about while in a dating or a courtship relationship, to start to look at it. I think somebody made a comment very early on that, going to family occasions before you get married, having conversations when you are dating, because conversations where you are hearing your spouse every time talking about, oh, my mom said this, it's a red flag. When you are dating, somebody who is calling his mother or his father, or a woman who is calling her mother and a father in every sentence, is a red flag, because you need to marry somebody who is emotionally matured. Not everybody walking down the aisle is ready for marriage. And unfortunately, that's the situation. So, like Tunde said, if you are in that, I call it unfortunate situation. It's actually an unfortunate one that somebody would marry a woman and still be getting validation from their parents because they did not live emotionally. But you either start to pray and look for wisdom, like Tunde said, on how to address it, because I've seen it wreck homes, literally break homes and families. So using that wisdom to say, where is this gap? And never underestimating the power of prayer, like he said, that can turn, because the Bible says the heart of kings is in God's hands. So there's also a way in which God can start to bring situations to put that man or that woman under pressure to break out of such toxic relationships, and like you said, you really have to depend on God and use wisdom. But it just shows that we must be super careful before we enter our relationships, to really gauge where people are at. I don't know, I can't believe how time has flown. This has been so amazing, so interesting. We probably still need to do a part 2 in a different way, because I think there are issues here, and I'd love to seriously bring our counselors back, because there are about 2-3 scenarios that I feel needs to be, maybe we need to dig in deeper. We've given a summary, and I don't know if Jumoke has, I'll let Jumoke speak to, just some of her own reality, because I always tease her that, Jumoke and her husband are both firstborns. And so when the children days were coming, they both had, moms who wanted to be very involved in the care of the children. Jumoke, I don't know if in 2 minutes, just share what's possible, because I always say that was very rare, at least for me. I hadn't seen the scenario that played out for you before.
Yeah, I always say God was looking out for the both of us, so for my husband and I, when he brought us together. So very quickly, when we met, along the lines, the mothers became friends. So that was a blessing. So you remember when we were talking earlier about, the meddling and all those, I think except for toxic, like if toxic is not taken care of, that's the only way I would say outlaw the in-laws. Everything else, meddling and controlling, it could be worked out, right? So for us, the mothers were friends. And then when we had their first grandchild, both families had one baby. I didn't have twins. I had both moms in the house. We were in a 1-bedroom apartment. Yeah, my husband, myself, 2 mothers, and a baby. So wisdom is key. I think a couple of us have said, women, God has equipped us with wisdom. I was much younger. I don't think I knew what I was doing, but it helped that they were friends. And it helped that I'm not the type of person that wants to fight every battle, fight every war. I really pick my battles. So giving them the baby worked for me. I gave them the baby. I always tease them. They had one baby, and 2 moms they were in the bathroom together, putting one sock on the left leg, one is putting on the right leg. I just gave them the baby and held on to the person I married. But that's the kind of person I am. But that worked for us, because in terms of meddling and controlling, yes, there were some issues, but we didn't really have a lot of issues because both of them were friends. Now, the issue that came really in our marriage came when others saw that beautiful relationship with both mothers. Like, I would be with Olumide's mom, and they thought that was my mom, and people even said I look like her, whatever. But you now have to be aware that when you have something good like that, you can't take it for granted, and you have to be protective of that. That was where we had issues, when we had people from outside, not even in the family, that really did not like that and tried to poke holes, jabs, and everything, like Gabby was saying, and that could create a gaping hole. So I just want to say there's hope in this in-law thing. We don't have to outlaw all the in-laws. It's doable. There has to be good compromise. There has to be love for your family that reaches out to the other family members, and it could be done. I know we're out of time. We really need another show for this
No,
topic.
we do. We absolutely do. There are one or two scenarios, and for that show, we're going to probably really bring some marriage problems. And if Tunde and Jacqueline can please be ready, we're going to give you the data, we'll announce it, where we dig deeper, because these are major problems people are facing on multiple levels. And the husband and wife, sometimes they are so fed up of the whole thing that it's bringing such a wedge between them. And we need this strong talk for men and for women on how to handle it. We're out of time, but I want to just say a huge thank you to our guests today. You guys were amazing. Thank you, Tunde. Thank you, Jacqueline. Amazing. Good to have you. Thank you to my ladies. Thank you, Dami, for keeping it real as usual. To Jumoke and to Tutu. We miss the other ladies, Faye, Tosin, Lola. And can I use this opportunity to say a quick happy birthday to Tunde. His birthday was yesterday. Family, he had to get out of the hotel room so he wouldn't be distracted to be here today. Happy birthday. We love and appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Join us on our next show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The next show is going to be sizzling. So although we're going to have a part 2 of this, but the next one is in the debunking series. This season, we're debunking different things. And we're going to be debunking sexual myths. Oh my goodness. This one is what you call hot. You know, the things people say, as long as you're married, anything is okay. Put a pole in your bedroom, is fine. Flip on the chandelier is not nobody's business. Let's really talk about it. Should we, everybody, just mind your business? Or are there certain things that could move some boundaries when it comes to sexuality in marriages? People are getting very interesting. It will be interesting to find out what your thoughts are. So we look forward to seeing you here. Thank you so much. The feedback from our audience was super fantastic. Thank you for being a part of this show. As most of us know, there's something that goes on relationships with Adenyke every week. MyTake will be back in 2 weeks, but next week on this channel, next Sunday, we're going to be premiering another amazing interview. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube page right now, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We look forward to connecting with you. Until we all meet again, God bless. Have a great weekend. Bye from all of us here. Bye-bye.
Bye.